Hey y'all, welcome back for another Epic on a Budget deck list. This time we're going to be talking about Boros Convoke. And basically Boros just means it's red and white, and Convoke refers to a very fun ability that a couple of our creatures have that basically let you tap your creatures to pay for the mana, essentially. We'll get into the details in a second, but both of these creatures give you pretty big payoffs for having a bunch of creatures, which is what we'll do. Okay, and so one of them, just puts +1/+1 encounters on your stuff. The other one lets you dig for more creatures and puts them in your hand. So it's a pretty fun deck. It's very explosive. Oftentimes it can get a lot of power on the board very quickly. And like other Epic on a Budget decks, it's under $20 using TCG player prices. When you click the link in the description below for the deck list, it'll often default to another one, so just change it to TCG player prices if you want the same price. Let's dive into it. I'll start off with the big Convoke creatures, and then we'll talk about how we enable them. Okay, so this one is a 4/4 for 5 mana. It has Convoke, so it costs 4 and a white, but Convoke means that for each colored mana in the spell's cost, you can tap a creature, an untapped creature you control of that color instead of paying the mana. And for each generic mana in the spell's cost, you can tap an untapped creature you control instead of paying the mana. Okay, so basically what that means is that you can like tap 5 creatures, including at least one white one, to play this for free, right? If you only have 4 creatures, well, then you just have to pay a mana too, along with tapping all 4 creatures, that kind of idea. Okay. In case it ever matters, though, you are not actually paying the mana. This reminder text right here suggests that it's paying the mana, which is not actually quite true. In most cases, it won't matter, but if your opponent does have something that cares about, how much mana was spent to cast a spell, Convoke is instead of paying the mana. Okay, so it's really kind of cool. This is a 4/4 you can play for free, and on top of that, when it enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 encounter on each creature that convoked it. So each one of your creatures that you tapped to play it, you put a +1/+1 encounter on it, which is pretty awesome. And this is actually part of how we can get like up to 14 power on turn 2. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. And Knight Errant of Eos is just another super solid one that's almost the same. The cost and the stats are the same, so 5 mana 4/4 with Convoke, but its enters the battlefield ability is a little different. You look at the top 6 cards of your library, and you may reveal up to 2 creature cards with mana value X or less from among them, where X is the number of creatures that convoke to Knight Errant of Eos. And then you put the revealed cards into your hand and shuffle. Okay, so what's really nice about that is if you do convoke it with 5 creatures, then you can look at the top 6 cards of your library and put any 2 creatures in this deck into your hand. Okay, Knight Errant of Eos and Venerary Loxodon each cost 5, so you do have to convoke it with 5 creatures if you want to put either of them in. However, if you only have 3 or 4 creatures, it still is very valuable because you have so many 1-drop and even some 2-drops and 3-drops that you'll still generally hit plenty of things to get value out of it. Okay, and besides that, it's still just a 4/4, right? So super awesome. Okay, so those are what we're kind of building up to in terms of creatures on the board. And we're trying to get these out on turn 2 or 3 ideally. How we do that is with a bunch of little creatures, and especially creatures that create tokens. Okay, so Novice Inspector and Thraben Inspector, each they're functionally identical actually. So they're each a single mana, white mana for a 1/2, and when this creature enters, investigate, which means that you create a clue token. Okay, which is a token artifact clue with the ability pay 2 and sacrifice it. Note that you don't have to tap it. Okay, you just pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. Also, Voldaren Epicure. For a red mana, you get a 1/1, and when this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and you create a blood token, okay, which is right here. So blood token is a token artifact, blood, and it has the ability to pay 1 and tap it and discard a card and sacrifice this token to draw a card. So you have like 12 different creatures that can each make a token artifact when they enter. And clues and blood tokens are both useful in their own right. However, how we really want to use them is with Gleeful Demolition. So this costs a single red, and it's a sorcery, and it says destroy target artifact. If you control that artifact, create 3 1/1 red Phyrexian Goblin creature tokens. Okay, so those are right over here. All right, which means that if, say, we play a Novice Inspector on turn 1, and then that creates a clue token when it enters. Then on turn 2, we target that clue token with Gleeful Demolition. We get 3 goblins, and then we play any of our other 1-drops. We have 5 creatures, and we can immediately play a Venerated Loxodon or Knight Errant Vios. Okay, and that's how you can get up to 14 power on turn 2, is by playing a Venerated Loxodon, and then you have its 4 power, and it puts a +1/+1 counter on your 5 creatures, and there you go. Okay. However, you don't actually have to do that to still get tons of value out of it, right? Now, another really nice thing to do with all those creatures and tokens and whatnot is Warden of the Inner Sky. Okay, so this is a 1 mana 1/2. So a single white mana. As long as Warden of the Inner Sky has 3 or more counters on it, it has Flying and Vigilance. All right, and it has the ability to tap 3 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on Warden of the Inner Sky. Scry 1. Activate only as a sorcery. Okay, so basically you can just tap 3 of your things that aren't lands, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, Warden of the Inner Sky, and scry 1, which is very nice because we have a very low mana curve. Especially because we're planning on casting these 5 mana creatures for nothing. We really don't want a lot of land. Like after we get to 3 lands, we don't actually need more lands. Also, once you get a bunch of little creatures out, you don't really need more little creatures that badly. So you generally just like scry to get rid of anything except for big stuff. Okay, basically. It also helps you find removal in case you need it. Scrying is basically just looking at the top card of your library. Scrying 1 is you look at the top card of your library and you can put it on the bottom or back on the top. Okay. And since you can do that a few times in a turn, oftentimes, then you can actually filter your draws pretty well in this deck with the Warden of the Inner Sky. All right, now the other 1-drop that we haven't talked about yet is Giant Killer. Every deck needs a little bit of removal, and so Giant Killer is it's a 1 mana 1/2, so it does still fit the theme of the deck nicely, but it has an adventure, which is Chop Down. You can pay 2 and a white for an instant to destroy target creature with power 4 or greater. Okay, and if you do cast it for its adventure, you exile it, and then you can cast it as a creature later. Okay, like immediately thereafter or on a later turn, whenever. Right? Whenever you can cast a creature. All right, and the really nice thing is even if you play it as a creature to get your creature count up or whatever, it still can act as pseudo removal by paying 1 and a white and tapping it to tap target creature. It's nice to get rid of blockers or whatnot. All right, so those are all of our 1-drops. They're very effective at getting lots of pieces of cardboard on the battlefield, basically, right? So most of these will create tokens. And next up we have 2 mana. We've got Resolute Reinforcements, which is just another way to get 2 pieces of cardboard from 1 piece of cardboard. So 1 and a white for a 1/1, and when this creature enters, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token. So that's nice. We just get 2 1/1s for 2 mana. It does also have Flash, so you can cast it at instant speed, which can make it a nice little combat trick if your opponent attacks in. They think you don't have blockers because you're all tapped out. and you're like, oh, hey, actually I do have blockers, right? So that's nice. All right, now we also have Case of the Gateway Express with all these little creatures running around. It is nice to have removal and something that pumps them, makes them bigger, which Case of the Gateway Express actually does both. So it costs 1 white, and when it enters, you choose target creature you don't control, and each creature you control deals 1 damage to that creature. So that's a good way to get rid of a lot of things. Honestly, if you have 3 or 4 or 5 creatures, you can get rid of lots of different creatures that might be causing you problems. And then this is a case, so basically at the end of the turn, it checks this condition. If you attacked with 3 or more creatures this turn, okay, and if you did attack with 3 or more creatures that turn, then it becomes solved, which basically means that it unlocks its last ability, which is creatures you control get +1/+0. So, like I said, it's a nice way to just have removal and a way to pump your team all in one card. Okay. Next up, we've got Imodane's Recruiter, which is a 3-drop, 2 and a red for a 2/2. And when Imodane's Recruiter enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. So again, just a nice way to pump your whole team. It can be very, very useful to do that when you've got 5 or 6 little 1/1s or 2/2s or something. Okay, so very solid card. It also has kind of a backup adventure. You're not really planning on casting the adventure on this one, but you totally can if you do draw it with enough mana and not enough creatures to make this useful. You can just cast the adventure, which creates 2/2 white knight creature tokens with vigilance. So not bad, not bad. Because in the next turn you can cast Imodane's Recruiter as a creature and then attack with 3 creatures from the 1 card, right? So very nice little pump spell, honestly. So now this actually is a Pioneer Tournament deck list, essentially, up to this point. Okay, it's just a common way to set up a Boros Convoke Pioneer Tournament list. Where we kind of stray from the Pioneer list is in our mana base, because it's a $20 deck and not so we can't really spend $100 on mana. So in this deck, we really want our lands to come into play untapped, and so we have kind of prioritized lands that at least can come into play untapped, right? Battlefield Forge is a really good one because it always comes into play untapped, and it taps for colorless, or it deals 1 damage to you when you tap it for red or white. Still totally worth it. And this is definitely one of your best lands because you're very happy to pay 4 or 5 life, honestly, in the first few turns to have a really explosive start. Okay, because you'll generally just win the game before your opponent can make use of the fact that you paid 5 mana to your lands, 5 life to your lands. Okay, so generally just win before your opponent will be able to take advantage of the fact that you paid 5 life to your lands. Okay, next up we've got Clifftop Retreat. It enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a mountain or a plains. Okay, so if we've already played one of these guys, then it just comes into play untapped, which is super nice. Fury Calm Snarl is basically the opposite in a way. So when it enters the battlefield, you can reveal a mountain or plains from your hand, and if you do, then it enters untapped. If you don't, it enters tapped. Okay, so the sequencing is a little interesting because basically you want to keep Clifftop Retreats in your hand and play the basics first. With Fury Calm Snarl, you want to play this first and keep the basics in your hand. So the sequencing, you just want to keep that in mind as you're figuring out what to play when. Okay, and then you have Mountain and Plains, 4 mountains, 5 plains. Okay, so that's basically the deck. Yeah, let's head to the playtester to see how it plays out. Alrighty, so here we've got a couple of Battlefield Forges, which always enter untapped, so that's very nice. We've got Voldaren Epicure and Thraben Inspector to give us artifacts, and we've got Veterinary Loxodon to convoke, Gleeful Demolition to turn an artifact into 3 Goblin tokens, and Iodine Recruiter to play to pump everything. So this is actually like a perfect hand. Wow, that's cool. Let's keep it. Like we don't even have to draw anything, and we could win the game. So we'll just play Battlefield Forge, take a damage to play a Voldaren Epicure. Okay, so we took a damage to play it, but our opponent took a damage when this entered. Okay, because it deals 1 damage to each opponent. And we create a blood token. All right. So then we will pass the turn. And on turn 2, we'll play Gleeful Demolition. And to do that, we will take another damage from our land. We'll destroy the blood token. And we will create 3 goblins. All right. And we will take another damage to play a Thraben Inspector, which will create a clue token. All right. Now, I did want to destroy the blood token with Gleeful Demolition because blood tokens are generally not as useful as clue tokens, since you have to discard a card to activate the ability, and clue tokens just give you a card. Okay. But now, look at that. We have 5 creatures, including a white creature, which you do need, to convoke Venerated Loxodon. So we will just tap all those and play Venerated Loxodon for free. Right? And then we'll put a +1 counter on each of these creatures that convoked it. All right, now this is turn 2, and we have 14 power on the board. All right, so that's pretty good. And we've got a 4/4 blocker that's just chilling there. All right. So at this point, we didn't draw a 3rd land to play Imodine's Recruiter. So we won't be doing that. However, in general, that could be a really good option if you do have a 3rd land, right? Because then you could just pump everything. As it is, though, no worries, because we can just swing in with a lot of damage, right? So let's do that. So let's just swing for 14. And this is on turn 3, so our opponent has had 2 turns. So maybe they block something and kill it, and they chump block that, and so they take 8. And right now we could play a Voldaren Epicure just to get a creature out and deal damage, which would totally be a good option. Or we could sack this clue to draw a card and hopefully hit a land drop to play Imodine's Recruiter next turn. So I'm going to opt for that one. It does depend on what our opponent has played, but they likely don't have a lot if they just blocked a 4/4 and a 2/2 after only their 2nd turn. So I'll draw that. Oh, perfect. Drew the land drop. So we'll play that, and next turn we can play Imodine's Recruiter and pump everything. Okay. So then, oh, perfect. We also got a Clifftop Retreat. So now we can actually tap 1, take a damage, and play a Voldaren Epicure, which will deal 1 damage to our opponent, give us a blood token, and then we can tap these, and we don't even have to take another damage because this gives us a red, and this came into play on tap because of the planes. Okay. So this gives us the red that we need, and then a couple generic for an Imodine's Recruiter, and so everything gets +1/+0 and haste. Okay. So that means we can attack for 3, 8. Each of these is 3, so that's 12, so that's 20, and 22. Okay, so attacking for 22 damage. At that point, it's doubtful that your opponent has been able to build up a sufficient board to block that. So you should just win the game, right? And in the crazy case that they did, well, you've got another Hamid Integrator in your hand for next turn. Okay, so that's basically how this deck plays out. All right. Okay, so that was a pretty good game, and honestly, very good demonstration of how well this deck can perform. One really nice thing is even when you don't get the totally ideal hand, you have a lot of ways of filtering your draws, drawing more cards, and it really does rather well at sculpting your hand to be very good, even when you don't get the ideal hand from the get-go. It's a very fun deck. I feel like it's pretty explosive, but also has some decent staying power with some big creatures and whatnot. So super fun, and hopefully you really enjoy it. Definitely, if you build it, please let me know. And if you like this, just please subscribe so that YouTube's algorithms and I know that you like it. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Ciao.